Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. I'm here today with one of my favorite people, Darcel Elliott,
You
former,
say that for every one of your guests.
no, I change it. And this time I really mean it, Darcel. She's my former boss. I worked for her in the assembly, and I'm going to have a great conversation with her and talk to her about her career, her highlights, and where she's headed, and kind of just go a little bit down memory lane and maybe talk a little bit about what she sees for the future for Santa Barbara County and the Board of Supervisors. Darcel Elliott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. As we discussed, I'm getting over a cold, so don't know if I sound a little raspy or something, but maybe that's good.
Yeah, well, thank you for making time. I know that you've got a lot going on, and it's a really important time for you because you are leaving public office along with Doss Williams, the former First District Santa Barbara County Supervisor. And you've been with him professionally for almost a couple of decades. And so, we talk about Doss leaving the position, but also you are leaving something that has been your life for so long. And I've had the privilege of working as a staff member, and if I was never did that, I would never know the amount of work that staff does to support elected officials. It's so big. It's so important. You put them in positions to be successful. You respond to constituents, and you've been doing that for so long. And a lot of people don't necessarily see that. You're not on the front end. The elected gets the attention, but I have great respect for you and staffers who do that work. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Darcel, how are you feeling right now? You're ending this term. You're moving on to new things. You're going to have a whole different life coming up. What's going on? How are you feeling about this transition?
Yeah, I feel like not much has changed just yet. We have Doss's career celebration coming up on the 15th, Wednesday the 15th, and I've been trying to make myself available for the transition and everything, and of the first district office, but also the county Democratic Party stuff. And so anyway, so it feels sort of like just a long weekend right now, and also I've been sick for a few days, so I don't think it's really hit me yet that I'm taking a break from politics and public service for a bit. And yeah, so I'm hoping to go away a little bit, maybe after the MLK weekend or something, and try to reset and refocus on what are my goals during this time. But so yeah, it's a little hectic, doesn't feel totally different yet, but um yeah, an interesting time.
So you worked for Doss Williams, obviously at the county, but also in the state assembly for 6 years. And he was on the city council, and I believe you were part of that at some point as a volunteer for his campaign. Of course, the city council does not have the type of staff that these other positions do, but you've known him for a long time, and you've been with him through every step, and you've sort of seen his journey. But you also are experiencing that in your own way. Talk to me about what you are going to remember, miss about the various stages of your political life. And you have a long future ahead of you. This is just the ending of a first part. But what are you thinking about? What are some memories?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna miss really problem solving. Um, I've never really considered myself a creative person because I'm not creative in the sense of like I create art or anything like that. But I actually took some sort of test that was like, what are your strengths? And creativity was one of my highest ones. And I thought about that for a while, and I realized I'm really creative when it comes to problem solving. And obviously that can come into play in a variety of ways. But when you're working in government, you're working on some of the most um, immense problems that there are. And it's really daunting. But it's been such a great, I get such joy out of figuring out like, okay, how about this? And can we try this? And, all of that stuff, and having people care what I think, and care about solutions I'm proposing, and just doing the groundwork to make it happen. And Yeah, I'm gonna really, really miss that part. And also, I'm kind of excited to take a break from thinking about all of the world's biggest problems because I really, really, those of you who know me, like, I genuinely, genuinely care about the work that I do, and it follows me every step I take. When I'm showering, when I'm going to sleep, I'm thinking about these problems and how to solve them, like most people in public service. So I'm hoping to get a little bit of a break from thinking about all the ways the world can end
Yeah.
and how to solve it.
There's no way for somebody who has not worked in that world to understand the amount of work a chief of staff does or a district director does. It's so much of these little things, right? Where it's constituent service, it's politics, it's being available in an instant, being flexible in the moment. What what period would you say was like the most fun for you? The supervisors, the assembly, the council years, they all come with different challenges, of course. But
I would say um I would say definitely the assembly years before I became district director. I'm grateful that DOS put me in that position and to have been chief of staff and to have been able to hire people that I have invested time in. I love mentoring. You know that about me, and we talked about that before in other podcasts I've been on. But the administrative stuff is not really my strength. And so, anyway, it's more when I went over to the county, I got to do less of the like nitty gritty stuff because so much is taken up by managing the whole picture. In the assembly, I was able to work on really specific projects. But I mean, the absolute most fun time and the proudest was definitely the creation of the Isla Vista Community Services District. I led the process to um, create the bill, Assembly Bill 3 in 2015, to that authorize the district to exist. And obviously now they're doing great things and yeah, but that process of going through, we met every week on a Tuesday in Isla Vista Community Room. I put white butcher paper up. I was like, this was my image forever. It was like markers in hand and white butcher paper behind me with different elements of governance about board makeup and revenue and powers and all this stuff. And it was just, I'm a community organizer at heart. That's what when I learned community organizing in DOS's 2010 primary campaign, that's what really um, did me in terms of like wanting to stay in politics and wanting to work in this world. And that was just the crux of like it was just everything coming together in that moment to run that process and help create that government.
yeah, because you couldn't write a job description for what you do, right? I mean, there's no way. I mean, you can have one, but add five times more on top of that, and then new stuff that you could not have imagined or predicted. And that's the role when you're an organizer and when you're working for an elected. And I worked for you, and I remember seeing you constantly busy. You're constantly on your phone. You're constantly talking to people. You're planning. You're thinking about the future, and it's an incredible job. And not a lot of people are able to have that job when you work for a legislator. So in the assembly, right, you were deputy district director, and then you eventually became district director. What was it like to work with DOS? Can you offer like a little insight into, being his staffer beyond what we might see publicly?
In the assembly or just overall?
Yeah, in the assembly. Yeah.
Yeah, in the assembly was really chaotic and hectic. And um, lucky for me, because I kind of had these special projects, because DOS sort of envisioned in his assembly office, we would have these things called neighborhood committees, which was basically a continuation of the community organizing we did in his assembly campaign. And those were my project in the assembly. So I got to do a lot of work with that. And I actually dealt with him less in terms of like schedule and like staffing him and all of that stuff. But the assembly is extremely chaotic because especially when you're in the district, and because you don't get like weekends because that's when the member is in the district, and like state of California, you have to work Monday through Friday unless you're taking vacation time. The weekends don't like they don't. I think they allow for flex time now, because they've had troubles hiring people, but back then they didn't have that. So we would work like 60 hours a week, easy, like being in the office Monday through Friday, or out in the field representing DOS or working on these special projects, and then DOS comes in Friday through Sunday and you're staffing him at all those events. And so it was just such a whirlwind, and like I didn't get as much time with him then. No one did. I mean, it was like you had to, if you were driving him somewhere, that's the 10 minutes you got to talk to him about something. So at the county, it's been really different. And when we had like an adjustment period of like working together in an office because we hadn't really done that. Even on like campaigns that we worked on and stuff, like it wasn't like working together in an office. And so, and DOS has always given me an incredible amount of freedom to do what I want. And so, yeah, so that was a bit of a balancing that first like year. But then honestly, the Thomas Fire and debris flow happened, and that really changed um, everything and how we approached being at the county and how we worked together, and just so that really shifted a lot of things.
Yeah, I remember that era. You're charging his car. You're moving surfboards. You're pulling car seats out of cars. It's
Yeah,
that's
famously, DOS Dawn of DOS's surfboard cracked my my window, my front window, my windshield. Um, when we were moving into the office, like and yeah, he
those are
paid
the
he did pay to fix it. So
Yeah, and those are all the things, you need, it's a razor, it's a shirt, it's like he needs this right now because he left this somewhere else and you've got to make it happen, and so those are the kind
and
of
part of the transition when he came to the county was I was like, no, we're not doing that. Like now you're here, you're in the office,
grown
like
up.
you know. So it was a bit of a dance of like you're not in the, and honestly in Sacramento and the assembly, they really treat them like it's the member, like they really get the star treatment. And for those who like me, my relationship with DOS, like I do not treat him like a star at all. I'm like, no, you have to do the same work all of us is doing. Um, so yeah, so that was a little bit of a transition, I think, for him also.
I drove him to LAX one time and, it was hot and, he was like complaining about the air conditioning being on, I'm like, okay, I'll just roll down the window. Marcel, you're kind of a likely story in politics. You were from Santa Maria. You grew up in Santa Maria. Let's talk a little bit about you and your journey and how you even got involved in working for DOS or in the legislature or for the county. When you're I think a history major. So talk to me about Darcel in Santa Maria, what it was like, and what sort of led you to where you came.
Yeah, I mean, I was always sort of like peripherally interested in politics. My parents were Democrats. My dad turned into a Republican later, but uh actually after I got super involved in politics, so it was sort of weird. But like they were big fans of Clinton and stuff. And I recently found my journal from seventh and eighth grade. And in it, I had a like entry about the Monica Lewinsky scandal, like when I was 11. Like I wrote about that in my journal. And I remember when the day after Election Day 2000, I was a freshman in high school, and I was like so depressed because it looked like it would end up going on much longer, but it looked like Bush was going to win, and he did win, and no one else seemed to care. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm alone wolf here. So I was always peripherally interested in politics, but definitely started getting more engaged my last year at UCSB. I went to school actually to be a high school history teacher, but I got really involved in the Planned Parenthood group on campus at UCSB, and I met Gina Fisher there, who's chief of staff for Joan Hartman now. But yeah, Gina and I go way back. She'd love for me to give a shout out that she's one of the only people that knew me and Doss separately before we knew each other. And so I started volunteering with Planned Parenthood on Hannah Beth Jackson's 2008 state Senate race. And then I got an internship on Hannah Beth Jackson's state Senate race, um, Doss was the field director and hired me as a paid canvasser, and then sort of the rest is history.
So you went to UCSB, you wanted to be a teacher, and then you just got the politics bug through Planned Parenthood and meeting other individuals. Do you recall your first interactions with Doss? What were those like? Were you like, who is this guy? Or, did it take a while for you to build up your, professional chemistry, or, what was that like?
Well, I remember Alina Anderson now, then Richardson. She was my intern supervisor, and she had worked for Doss in the city council, and she talked about him a lot. And I mean, everybody talked about Doss, like, because he was involved in the campaign, but he was rarely like in the office. And I think I remember the first time I met him that I was like, oh my God, Alina, can you introduce me to Doss? Because and it's funny because I think now there are interns who feel this way about me, that they hear Darcel, 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 but they don't actually, when they actually meet me, they're like, oh my gosh, so you're Darcel,
Right.
And Doss actually tells a story a lot that he overheard me phone banking, talking to a voter, and he was blown away by how good my interactions were with voters and how easy it was for me to like pivot and just have a conversation with a voter. And that's why he wanted to hire me. And I actually have the email that I sent him about me starting as a paid canvasser on that. It's kind of boring. It's not like that interesting of an email, but yeah, then he offered me a job as a paid canvasser there, and I was working at Albertsons as a manager
Hmm.
at Albertsons by the Costco by UCSB.
Yeah.
I worked there for 5 years, and I worked there full time while doing political stuff on the side. On the side, although all my political stuff was also full time, until like late 2010 when Doss won assembly. So yeah, I sort of, but I had went to be a teacher, but then I graduated in 2008 when the recession was, at its worst, and everyone I knew that was in the teaching program was leaving the state, and so I decided maybe it wasn't the best time to become a teacher.
Yeah. In these jobs, there's not a lot of stability. You see people moving around, or they do it for a few years, and you're able to stick with one person this whole time. Talk to me about that, about your decision. What compelled you? What led you to say, I'm staying put here. I'm going to be in the assembly, and then I'm going to go in the county, and whatever happens after that. Because you see, if you just look around, right, Doss's staff in the assembly, like you're the only one, left, and people go to other places. And what was it that made you want to say, I'm going to stay on this journey with this person?
Yeah, I mean, I think Doss is like, I think my ideal politician, honestly. Like, I think a lot of stuff that sometimes people like you can criticize him for are things that I really love about him. I think he's the most honest and genuine. He's honestly the most honest and genuine person I know, period, let alone like for an elected official. Working for him has been bizarre because we try to find like just for example, like a mail piece on a campaign. someone else puts this together. They put bullet points based on, things they look up. And DOS is all these emails with DOS being really specific about, well, actually, that's not exactly correct. Like, we did it this way. Like, he wants to be really specific about what he's accomplished and what he hasn't. And getting into the policy details and all that stuff. And it's just, it just really, really was like, wow, this is what I want in a politician. So that's why I decided to go work for him. And also learning how to I was trained in the UFW model of organizing for the assembly campaign. And community organizing is really just where my heart is. I love it so much. And I got to do that in the assembly. Like I said, I got to kind of work on those special tasks. And honestly, my relationship with DOS has been different than pretty much any other staffer that he's had. And for, whatever reason, he just has immense trust and faith in me and has always given me the freedom to work on stuff that I want to work on, which I don't know any staff member for any elected official who has had the leeway that I've had to be like, oh, yes, I'm going to work on that project, I never say, oh, let me check with DOS. I'm always can say yes or no to things we'll take on. And I know him so well, I can speak on his behalf without ever having to check with him. And he'll always have my back, even if we sort of disagree on it, until I persuade him to agree with me. But yeah, so it's just been, and this is also why I need a transition period before I find another job, because I don't really know how to have a boss. Because DOS has been the only person I've answered to for so long. Even when I've gone off to work on campaigns for other people, it was always like a lone situation, right? So it was like always ultimately DOS was the person I answered to. And it's been extremely easy answering to him. So
Yeah, and that's a good transition. I'm working on a story. We've been talking for a long time about a story that I'm working on that kind of dives into a little bit more deeper about you and your journey in the last 20 years. But what has it been? Let's just like touch on it. Like, what has it been like for you? Because when you're staffing and elected, like they are number one. Like their needs have to come before your needs if you want them to be successful. And the public sees them as this professional, polished person, but really, they are the strength of their staff behind them. And you, for so long, have been that strength, right? That support, that staff. And people can kind of lose their identity a little bit in the elected. And I know that we've talked about that. How have you balanced that? What have you been able to do to sort of keep the focus on him, but also on you? And I know a little bit, it's difficult to do, so can you talk about that?
yeah. And I think, teasing the story that's going to come out, that you'll go into this a little bit more, but, I think my identity was fully like one with DOS. And I mean, we still are very much a pair. But I like took things so personally for him, like all this stuff, and just, was totally enmeshed with him at the start of my career with him. And a lot of that comes from like, my mom was an alcoholic, bipolar and an alcoholic. And so, there's a lot of codependency there and sort of like ended up kind of working into my relationship with Dawson. When my mom had her major heart attack in 2014, I sort of had to figure out how to like take care of my mom and have this professional life. And then after my mom died in 2018, it was just like very jarring. And I think also not having that relationship with my mom and even my dad, who died shortly after my mom, made me realize like very much the caretaker role that I had with my mom and my dad, I very much have had with Doss also, and very much like putting him first and always like, what do you need and all this stuff. And so, and Doss and I had like a lot, I mean, he, we're really very close. Like, and so we've had a lot of really good conversations around that time. And he's fully supported me, you know, figuring out what I need. His worst case scenario was me leaving to try to go be independent and figure out who I am on my own. And so he just truly supported me, trying to, I ran for Santa Barbara City College Board and, becoming chair of the Dem Party, which is kind of more of the same genre, but also like having more time to work out or like go to therapy and like just being off at a certain time. Like Doss has never really been one to bug me after hours anyway. Bug me, I guess. But like just being really like me being able to be like, I'm not working right now, and he'll be like, oh, okay, thanks. And so we had that opportunity to sort of work through that together behind closed doors. And then, well, obviously, like the beginning of our conversation was, some people did notice that I wasn't just shadowing Doss all the time anymore. That I was kind of doing things for myself too. But I think it was just part of me growing up. And I started working with him when I was 21. Like, it's crazy. So I went through my whole adulthood working with him. So, obviously at a certain point, I was going to want to forge my own path too.
It's a good transition to talk about DOS and the fact that the last supervisor's campaign didn't go well. We're talking about him, but I really focused on answers on like your feelings on this, right? So I've written a bunch of times and said a million times that like Roy Lee never should have won, right? Like I mean it's stunning, it's unbelievable. He did. I've had comments on his campaign. I've told you, like, hey, Darcel, you're not there. That's probably why he lost. Like there's, I know we disagree on that, but like, there's a correlation to you sort of pulling back a little bit and seeing him in public. Um, how are you dealing with the fact that this happened? Because nobody predicted it would happen this year. It's sort of like thinking he was kind of after beating Laura, he'd probably be there a long time, as long as he wanted. Um, how are you wrestling with that? Is there any second guessing? Is there any guilt? Was it meant to be? What's going through your mind on that?
I mean, I think if this was to happen, I think Dawson and I are both glad that it happened in March because it allowed us to kind of go through that grief process of like trying to figure it out. And yeah, I mean, you talked to me the day after the election, and you know how upset I was. I was crushed. I did not expect that. And yeah, there was a lot of second guessing because, as Democratic Party chair, so I didn't run Doss's campaign that year because I was Democratic Party chair, and so I had to oversee the entire Dem Party operation. And I and my focus was the third district race. I mean, that was everyone, right? Like after redistricting, Isla Vista was out of the third district, Lompoc was in. No one knew what was going to happen. All eyes on the third district, making sure, Joan was going to win and that the Democrats hold that seat. And I had like huge, emotional breakdowns and like over this because I did not want to be the chair that lost the third district. And so I put everything I have into that. And it also was like part of this bigger operation of trying to do more work in North County and doing a lot of community organizing in Lompoc around that race. But also, I think there was a lot of I've heard people like murmurs and stuff of people thinking that Doss would get special treatment with me as chair, but it was actually the opposite. Where like And I've always been like the rational one on Doss's campaign, but I've also always obviously worked really hard to get him elected. But when he freaks out about, I think I might lose, I'm like, dude, calm down. It's okay. Um, and, so this time even more so, I was like, it's not about you, it's about Joan. It's not about you, it's about Joan, and he really played the part. He would, like, when he came to walks in Goleta, he would talk about Joan and like the need to reelect her and stuff. And, he definitely canvassed a lot himself. He had paid canvassers on his campaign. Spencer Spencer, I would not have done anything different than what Spencer did in running that campaign, based on the information we had. Like, it's just resources are limited, and it was just all about the third district. Just like coming up in the fifth district's going to be open for the first time in 16 years or something. So all eyes are going to be on the fifth district, and hopefully, no one runs against Laura, because we don't want to have to fight on two battlefields, and I don't know what the outcome of this would do to that, right? Like, we really want to win that fifth district seat, but we don't want to lose another seat, and so at least Roy is a Democrat. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of second guessing, but I spent a lot of time processing it, and I think Dawson and I both have really come to peace with it, that, this is what was supposed to happen. And we both kind of need a break from the crazy, elected official lifestyle, which, even though and we've talked about this before, even though I'm not an elected official, I'm probably as close to an elected official without anyone having voted for me to be in the position. So,
Yeah, well, definitely, you are very powerful in terms of what you said, your access and the amount of freedom that he gave you to sort of work with him to drive policy, and that's very unique. Along those lines, do you have any thoughts on the future with the first district with Roy Lee? I know you've been part of the transition, and staff talking to staff, but what is your hope? What is your expectation? Do you want to see him fail? Do you want to see him successful? Um, this is politics. What are you thinking?
yeah, no, we definitely want to see him successful. And in all honesty, Dawson and I had very serious conversations about this in the months leading up, of how we were going to support the transition. I mean, there's crazy stories of of people who were in the same party who didn't even run against each other, kind of sabotaging the transition of like their predecessor and stuff. And it's like, there hasn't been that situation in a long time in the county, and so a lot of people didn't know how it was going to look. And so Dawson and I really got to figure out, like, what were we comfortable with, and what were our goals. And our goals, honestly, we genuinely care about the first district and our constituents. And I know some have felt like we don't care about them, but we do care about, the outcomes and the county and the future of the county. We are, as an institution, we are completely invested in the county as an institution. And so we've really tried to be cooperative in the transition, and making sure that I created this whole transition document for the team, and I met with Wade Cooper, his incoming chief, Roy Lee's incoming chief of staff, to go over things. And I've made myself available because we really do want them to be successful. And also, they did run against us, right? Like, they ran against us and me. And so obviously they want to do things differently. And that's fine. Like, and I met with Wade, and I had some tips for him, and he has a plan. And it's a different plan than I would do or have done, or even that other first district chief of staff have done. But I'm excited to see how that works out, because it's kind of almost like an experiment, right? Of like, does a different approach get different results? So, you know, I'm curious about that. And also, you know, Roy has been very open about saying, you know, he wants to listen to everyone and meet with everyone. All the meetings that we've been in with him, he has said, when asked his position on things, he just wants to bring people together to talk things out, which is, you know, great, especially if people feel like Doss didn't listen. Um, and there's going to come a point where you have to make a decision, and half the people are going to be mad at you for that decision, but like if you genuinely listen to them and you feel, and they feel listened to even if you don't do what they want. And that's sort of a question I have about politics in general these days is, you know, it's almost like if you're not 100% with me, then you're against me. So
Well, that's a problem of our society in general is there's not a lot of conversation in the middle. If you've done one thing, then you're all bad to some degree, and people don't see the whole picture. How, you know, you mentioned Roy, they ran against you, you know, Laura ran against us in a very high profile campaign. I mean, this is a genuine question. Like how do you not hold a grudge? You know, like Laura and Doss, right? They're great with each other. You and Laura are great with each other, you know, when I see you guys publicly. But I mean, these people, you know, Laura laid a blueprint. She damaged him publicly, and even though she didn't win, a lot of that stuff lingered. And then Roy comes in, and how do you not feel a grudge or hold a grudge when you know that, you know, you can still point to people in power who are actively trying to take him out of office?
yeah, and I mean that is hard. Um and I think it's all about having a bigger picture and keeping the bigger picture in mind of why do I do this? Why why have I spent the last 16 years of my life running myself into the ground? It's not because just because I wanted to get Doss elected, right? Like because I worked for him. Like I wanted to get Doss elected for a specific purpose because I believed that he could do the best to move forward policies I really care about, right? And all of the work that I've done, which, you know, I sent you a document I'm just starting to work on about all my legislative accomplishments because I feel like sometimes those get overlooked because that's what this is about. Like politics, like the campaign, some people, the campaign is just about winning, right? They just want to be on the winning side. But I think because I have so much experience on both the political side and the policy side, it's really shaped me into like understanding that no, all the political stuff is for the policy side. Like, so we can actually accomplish these things. And we can actually, you know, make a difference. And so, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, whatever, people say what they want to say to win, but like Laura and Doss are on the same team. Like they want the same things. They work towards the same policy goals, right? And Roy, we don't really know yet. Like, you know, like I've said, he doesn't seem, this is just my perspective, doesn't seem to have a lot of policy positions yet because he's still learning and he wants to hear from all sides. So we'll see how he ends up voting on certain things. But you know, he's a Democrat, so hopefully that's, you know, goes in the right direction, in my view, anyway. And so at the end of the day, if like the policy is getting advanced the way that I want it to, I don't really care who's in the seat. Like I just have thought that Doss was uniquely capable of advancing policy, and largely because of his ability to like not give everybody everything they want,
Mhm.
you know, to try to take a little bit from everyone's side. And you know, cannabis is always out there as the big thing that Doss messed up on. And I really don't hold that view as someone that was in the every room that a meeting was had on that, because I know no one really talks to the cannabis growers on this, but definitely don't feel like they got everything they wanted in the ordinance. And actually, the state did an audit and determined that our ordinance was actually too onerous and too difficult for people to get permits, which is why, the industry is not really taking hold the way people thought it would. Um, but I was in those meetings where DOS was trying to take some from the opponents and trying to take some from the growers and put them together and figure out a way forward. Um, and that's one example that's been very public, but it's the same thing with the Isla Vista Community Services District and stuff. And so, yeah, but I do wonder in general if that has a place in politics anymore. If you can win, if you can win election, if you're doing, not giving anyone 100% of what they want.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll just ask you the question. I did ask you it the day after when people were like, why are you asking her the day after? But, um, you know, why did DOS lose? Is it the ring nets? Is it cannabis? Is it constituents? I mean, is it like, it's all these things. It's none of them.
I mean, it's all the things, and mostly lower turnout. Turnout was about 10% less than it was in the 2020 primary,
Yeah.
particularly for Democrats. I mean, I got forwarded an email from, oh my God, I'm totally blanking on her name right now, which is not on purpose, but the Republican Party chair, Bobby
Bobby,
McGinnis,
yeah.
taking credit for Roy Lee getting elected, and Mike Stoker saying that he got him elected and stuff. Like, I mean, anyone and everyone can take credit when it's in that situation, right? Because the people who voted were the people who had a reason to vote, and the people that wanted DOS gone had a reason to vote, and people who wanted DOS to stay, like there was no presidential race on the ballot in that district. I did canvass actually in our district. We focused a lot of canvassing in like downtown West Side, East Side area, really focusing on renters' rights to try to drive turnout there to give people a reason to vote. And it was really hard because people were kind of like, there's nothing really on the ballot. Like DOS will be fine. I don't need to there was no urgency to vote to keep DOS. Whereas I think when Laura was running against him, there was more urgency, right? Because it was like, well, first of all, there was a really aggressive campaign on both sides. So people were aware of it, but there was like, oh, he could lose. And so, yeah. So it's just all of these things compounded.
And we're going to wrap up in a second, but I don't want to forget about your role as chair of the DCC, because that's, as you mentioned it, that's bigger. That's bigger than any one elected official. And now you've got to think of the party. And you, as chair, and even before chair, did a lot of work to build power in the North County to, get people elected, recruit. David Silva is a good example of that. And you made a lot of progress in expanding the reach of the Central Committee. Can you talk about that? What was that like for you to serve in that position and some of the gains you had?
Yeah, yeah, it was very fulfilling to serve in that position after, when I met with Wade, actually to talk about transition stuff, he was like, did you want to be chair of the party? Because the most thankless job there is. It's a volunteer role. I had to use a ton of my vacation time to make fundraising calls all the time to raise money. So actually I almost paid money to be in the role, right? But it was kind of the culmination of, I got elected in 2021 and I started getting involved in the party in 2008. So, however many years that is. I'd been very active in our local party working on campaigns for all of our endorsed slate of candidates, and had a lot of opinions about how things should be done, particularly thinking that there should be more attention in North County, and especially during the redistricting process when people were freaking out about Isla Vista getting taken out of the 3rd district. I was thinking to myself, this wouldn't be such an issue if we had built systems in North County 10 years ago, when the last time we were freaked out about Isla Vista leaving the 3rd district. So I really wanted to come in with that expertise. I'm very unique in the sense that I'm from Santa Maria, and I've now lived in Santa Barbara longer than I lived in Santa Maria, although I go there all the time to visit family and such. But to have the experience in both worlds, I guess, even though it's one county, and try to and have the depth of experience in community organizing also, which it's all organizing. Like that's when it comes down to it, it's all about having one-on-one conversations with people and talking about issues that they care about and making them feel heard and seen. And yeah, so I just really, really felt passionate about getting a North County organizer and working in North County. And so, and also there already was such a strong foundation in South County with Darcel and Gail. Darcel obviously was a huge part of building, and me also because Darcel was chair, but I was organizer on a lot of those campaigns where I was recruiting volunteers in and stuff. So, we have a solid system in South County, and I also personally just don't get as hung up on all the dem on dem races in South County. Maybe because I'm from North County, where I'm like, we're begging for one Democrat here.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was an extremely rewarding experience. If I come back to politics, I think it'll be to work on that 5th district seat. I really want to win that seat. I want Santa Maria to have a Democrat as a county supervisor. But I got to rest first before I can figure out that's what I want to do next. But not running for 5th district, right, but helping get whoever it is elected.
Yeah. What does rest mean for you? Are you, you obviously don't have a job specifically that you want to go to right now. Are you traveling? Are you going to just stay local? What does the next few months look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't really know the answer. Yeah, I'm hoping to get away for a little bit after MLK weekend, and just kind of unplug a little bit. But yeah, I'll probably travel a little bit. But my main thing is I'm really gonna dive deep into therapy, and I've been meaning to join adult children of alcoholics group for like 5 years now, and so I'm finally gonna do that. That's gonna be really hard work, but ultimately I need to work on my issues around boundaries and making sure that I've made so much progress since my mom passed away and like creating a space for myself. But I really need to learn boundaries and how to not take my work home. Like, I'm not joking about staying up at night thinking about all the problems at the county, right? Like, but that's not sustainable. So, and it led to me getting really burnt out. So whatever I do next, I have to be able to unplug from it at the end of the day and say, try again tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, some of us seek validation through work because we know we're valued there and we know we can see those results and it feels good. And, depending on your childhood, if you didn't get that, you're constantly sort of seeking it. And so it's important to sort of understand and reset those boundaries because your work cannot be your life. It's great if you love what you do, but it can't be the number one thing in your life that you need to focus on, yourself. That's the most important. And once you feel strong in who you are, then everything else is a lot easier. And that's a lot easier said than done because we're all people and we all have experiences and we're all the product of the people around us from the earliest ages and to adulthood, so that's good that you're going to be focusing on that. And I have to say that, it's great to see that you have done all this work, right? You've done so much working with DOS, but so much on your own as a staffer, as a chief of staff, as a district director. Most people would have never even met the person you're working for, but they've met you. you've had to deal with them and you were the one who brought answers to them. And that's huge, you know. And so you may not have that title, but you know, when you go to sleep at night, like, I did that. Someone else might get credit, but I was the one who did that. And that's great. And then, of course, your work with the DCC and expanding that is really important and significant. So, you know, I think you have a lot to be proud of. And, you know, you're very young. You've got a lot to do, you know, the second half of your life, whatever you choose to do it. And I think a lot of people will be expecting great things from you as you figure it out over the next few months. So, I appreciate your time. You know, I don't know, you want anything you want to add or say, you know, to people wondering about Darcel, you know, and your next steps.
Well, I did promise you as soon as I know what my next steps are, you would be one of the first to know. So you can determine if it's story worthy or not.
Okay. Yes, you can let me know. First in the media.
First in the media. No, yeah, you definitely won't be first, period. But I will be like, okay, I gotta tell Josh before this gets around too much.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people want to know what you're doing. So, but thanks a lot for your time. And, you know, we got a big story coming out. You know, people can learn a little bit more about Darcel. So thanks a lot. Have a great day.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.